Candice Pagoda. I am the Assistant Resident Director for the SIM UB program. Shortly, I will introduce our Resident Director, Dr. McKelvey. These are the topics that we are going to discuss first in our briefing, followed by we have a panel discussion at the end, and we'll conclude with a question and answer section. So some housekeeping notes. We will ask that at this time, if you haven't silenced and put away your cell phone, that you please do so. As you can see, again, it's a big crowd, big group, big open space. We'll ask if you have questions, comments, concerns, please take note of them during the presentation. If you need to step out for a phone call or wish to catch up with those around you, we'll ask that you please do so outside because we can hear all of the voices here on stage. We ask that you do not record this session. We do have a live streaming event going on. Any questions that you have, we will address them at the end of the presentation. If you have any individualized or specific questions, we will ask that you contact our students at sim.edu.sg email, and all of the fees and the prices that you see in this presentation are a reflection of the 8% GST, and the fees will be updated in 2024 according to the new GST. So without further ado, I will introduce our Resident Director, Dr. Kevin McKelvey.
Okay, so thank you, Candice, for the introduction. Oh, thank you for that too. Very nice to see a very robust crowd here this morning, and also to say a very warm welcome to the people who are viewing virtually in other parts of the world. So we are streaming this for remote audiences as well. My name is Dr. Kevin McKelvey. I'm the Resident Director of the University at Buffalo program here at the Singapore Institute of Management. I've been here now for over 19 years running our program. I think our program is something wonderful. I'm very, very proud of it, and I will be happy to share with you a brief introduction, a briefing about our program, the things that we offer, and what makes our program here in Singapore so special. And then following my presentation, we have a group of faculty and students who will also, alumni who will join us and share about their experiences with the program as well. So I'll start by talking about our home campus, our university back in the United States, University at Buffalo, the State University of New York. Just to be quite clear, even though we are here in Singapore affiliated with SIM, which is a private institution, we are a public institution back in the United States. And so we're part of a system of universities in the state of New York called the SUNY system, State University of New York. I'll show you what that university system looks like in just a moment. But out of all of the different campuses of our system, we are considered to be the flagship university. What does that mean? We have the biggest faculty, the largest number of students, the biggest research budget, the biggest library collection, all of those things. We are the biggest, and in my view, also the best of the universities within the SUNY system. If you are considering studying at an American university of any kind, you should always make sure that it's properly accredited. We have universities in the US that have accreditation and some that don't. And for it to be accredited means that you would then be able to progress to graduate school, be eligible for different kinds of jobs and so on. So we are fully accredited by the Middle States Commission. The United States is so huge that we don't have a national accrediting body. We have regional ones, and we are in the Middle Atlantic region, so our accreditation comes from Middle States. AACSB is a separate accrediting agency that accredits schools of management and business, and so that's the best level of accreditation that you can find for that. And I should mention, by the way, that here in Singapore, we are also regulated and audited routinely by the CPE, Committee for Private Education. So we are very, very robustly overseen by accrediting agencies on both sides. And we are also very proud of our membership in an organization called the AAU, Association of American Universities. These are the top research universities in the United States and Canada, which you cannot simply join. Rather, you have to be elected into it. So the founding members of that organization were schools such as Harvard, Princeton, Yale, MIT, and so on. and they invited us to join based on the quality and abundance of our research. And lastly, something that I'm also very proud of is the fact that we are in the top universities in the US for inviting international students. So if you were to visit our home campus, it's almost like going to the United Nations. There are so many different students from all around the world who come to Buffalo to study. One of the things I personally enjoyed very much about studying there. So I mentioned we're part of the SUNY system, and that is a map which shows what the system looks like. All of those little dots on the map are member institutions of the SUNY system. And we are out on the very western edge of the state of New York, on the border with Canada. Our campus is actually quite close to Niagara Falls, if you're familiar with that. New York City is way down in the lower right-hand corner. So we're quite a distance from New York. We're actually closer to Toronto. But within the system, there are 4 research universities: Buffalo, Stony Brook, Albany, and Binghamton. And as I mentioned, of those 4 research universities, we are the largest and considered to be the flagship. So I'll just say a few words. I assume that most of you are from Singapore or around this region, and so therefore you're familiar with more of the UK model of education. So I think one of the things that students find when they come to ours, it's an adjustment because the style of education that we offer is a little bit different. The American system is, one of the main things I would point out here is interactive. So when you come to a classroom at an American university, you can expect it to be very, very, very lively, interactive, and engaging, where you don't simply come and listen to lectures. I won't say that there are no lectures, sometimes there are, but it's much more likely that you're going to come to class. You may have some little introductory lecture, but then be involved in all kinds of different activities while the class is ongoing, different project works, discussions, and so on. So that's one of the things that I think is an adjustment for many of our students, because we sort of have an expectation that students will participate very actively. And I think for students who adjust to this and become accustomed to it, it's actually really, really very engaging and very fulfilling, and quite a lot of fun, quite frankly. So these are the other things: projects, participation. We don't really value memorization. And why would we? When you consider everybody now has a phone, you can just look things up instantaneously. So what we're more interested in is people's ability to take what they know and apply it. So learning different kinds of concepts and theories and working through projects and other kinds of things, case studies, in order to look at novel situations where they can apply what they have learned on a theoretical level or based on the research from within their discipline. We use what's called continuous assessment. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but the American version of continuous assessment is extreme, such that it includes participation, and it really starts from day 1 of the semester in the class, where based on your contributions, you're evaluated on that. But we also have quizzes throughout the semester. There could be a midterm and a final exam. In many cases, there's no final exam at all, but there could be a portfolio or a research paper or something like that. But the point is that there's lots and lots and lots of assessments for every given module, not just one big final exam, which means that students have to be engaged throughout the whole semester, which results, in my opinion, and in the opinion of American educators in general, in a much deeper level of learning and understanding, rather than just cramming everything at the last moment for a big final exam and then possibly forgetting it quickly thereafter. You're really learning at a very deep level by doing things constantly throughout the course of the entire semester. And finally, I've listed out here experiential learning. And that means that basically in most of our modules, there's some sort of component that's going to be very active and contribute to the building up of a various set of skills that are very useful to people once they've graduated and go on to the workplace. So we'll talk about that more when we come to our panel discussion later on. So something about our collaboration here with SIM. We've been working together as a partner program since 1996, when we first launched an EMBA program here. But now the undergraduate program has been going since 2004. So we'll be having our 20th anniversary in the coming year. And we started with 50 students in one major, business administration. We now have approximately 14 or 1,500 students from semester to semester and 7 different majors, which I'll point out in a moment. Our home campus is very, very actively involved here, so that they have for each department a coordinator who oversees the academic content, the curriculum, many other kind of procedural things that we do, policies, all of that is closely monitored by the home campus. Over half of the courses are taught by our visiting faculty who come from the US, and many of them are here now today, and so you can meet with them. And we have local faculty as well who teach some of our courses, and they play a very vital role because many of them are embedded within local industries and can help with networking and so on. They are all approved by the home departments, the departments at the home campus, and they have similar kinds of academic qualifications. We have myself and Miss Candace, who you met as a full-time academic or administrative staff here. So we oversee the program and are here year-round, thankfully, because we don't want to go back. And we have the same sort of credentials here in Singapore as you would get in the US, as terms of the same transcript, the same admissions requirements, everything is the same in terms of the content of the program, the textbooks that are used, the syllabi, and all of that. Now, there's also one nice thing about this program. You can do the whole thing here in Singapore, which is a big advantage, but you can also do part of it at the home campus in Buffalo, if you are keen. And so I will talk more about that. We call that UB Bound in just a moment. So what are we offering here at SIM? So our home campus is huge and has about 30,000 students and around 200 different majors. So we're a small program, but what we offer here is Bachelor of Science in 2 areas, Business Administration and Geographic Information Science, and then Bachelor of Arts in the subjects you see here, Communication, Psychology, International Trade, Economics, and Sociology. What's the difference between Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science? That question sometimes comes up. The Bachelor of Science tends to be more technical and quantitative. So you would find more courses at the upper level in math, statistics, and so on. But those they are not absent from the Bachelor of Arts degree. All of these are social science degree programs. So for all of them, there's a math requirement as well as a statistics requirement because we're training our students to be social scientists. So it's really more of a question of the overall emphasis, where the Bachelor of Science degrees are more quantitative, the Bachelor of Arts are less quantitative, but it's not an all or nothing proposition by any means. And you have the option to combine. You can combine any 2 of the Bachelor of Arts together for a double major. The 2 Bachelor of Sciences can also be combined for a double major. And you can combine any Bachelor of Science with any Bachelor of Arts, and then you would get a double degree. I will mention also that our programs that we are offering now are fully in person here on campus in Singapore. During the pandemic, naturally, we had so many of our classes by necessity offered online, but that is no longer the case. So if you choose to enroll in our program, be prepared to actually come to school. We have a new program that we're offering. We're starting this fall, called the Honors College. Now, this is different. I just want to make sure people understand this is not the same thing as an honors degree in the British tradition. So the British universities and anything that is based on them offer an honors degree, which means you do an additional year of studies and then you get that distinction. This does not entail extra studies. It just involves studies, doing certain kinds of experiential learning and other types of projects. It could be study abroad. It could be an internship. It shows that you're a student who has gone above and beyond just the minimal graduation requirements to do extra things in order to earn this distinction of honors. So it's competitive to get into, but we're hoping that many of our students will want to take this up. And so there's more information about it if you visit our website, so you can learn about the details, but that's something else that we have nice here to offer. Now, I mentioned that our program is, it can be completed completely here in Singapore. Everything that you need to graduate, all of the requirements for the major, all of the requirements for electives, general education, all of the different components you can finish in Singapore. However, some students want to have a study abroad experience and go over to our home campus in Buffalo, New York. And so before the pandemic, we were sending typically about 50 students would go every semester. That number dropped off significantly naturally because of travel restrictions, but it's starting to build up again. And what it means is that as long as you finish your admission to the major requirements here in Singapore and you're in good academic standing, a 2.0 GPA or better, you're eligible to go over. And you're already a UB student, so it's pretty much automatic for any student who wants to go. You have to apply for a visa, so you have to demonstrate that you have the financial resources and that you've completed your medical examinations and so on. But aside from that, it's very simple to go to the home campus. And it's Miss Candace who organizes and facilitates that for our students to help them make arrangements for housing, selecting their courses, and so on. So it's a wonderful opportunity. One of the things to take into account, though, is it is much more expensive. I'll talk about the cost of our program in a moment. But if you go to the home campus, you pay what's called out-of-state tuition. So anybody who's not from New York would have to pay this, whether you're from California or Singapore or anywhere else. If you're not from New York, you pay about $25,000 US per semester to study at our home campus. You will see in a moment that it's much more less expensive to study here in Singapore. Last thing on this slide is called OPT, Optional Practical Training. And what that is an extension of the student visa. So if you go to Buffalo and you graduate there, spend your last semester, you can then continue and get a extension to work or study or get an internship in the US after graduation. And so to be eligible for that, you have to spend one whole academic year in the US, typically fall and spring semesters. So it's a nice thing. Many of our students like to take that up as well when they are finishing up their program. And we do have one scholarship that we offer every spring and fall that will send it's a merit-based scholarship. So we'll send a student, we'll pay for their airfare, their housing, their tuition to spend a semester over in Buffalo. Now, this slide shows what the comparative costs are, what it would cost to study in Buffalo as opposed to what it would cost to study here in sunny Singapore. So you can see the details here, but generally the moral of the story is it's much, much, much cheaper to study here in Singapore. So if you were to go to the US and if you were to spend 4 years there, and which is the normal duration to get a bachelor's degree in the United States, it would cost you $197,300 US, and which comes over to something like $250,000 Singapore dollars. That's a lot of money. However, if you get it here in Singapore, what we have here is we've only shown the cost for the actual credits. So it would cost about 73,000 Singapore dollars for a citizen or PR, 77,000 for an international student. That's for 120 credits, which is the number of credits you need to graduate. Now, as it happens, everyone who's joining our program gets some sort of transfer credits or waivers based on their prior studies at Polytechnic or in A-level. In some cases, up to 50% of that can be waived or transferred in. So what it doesn't include is the cost of living in Singapore. So if you're a parent and you have a kid who wants to study at UB, you also have to factor in what are they going to eat? What's the cost of transportation to and from campus? And that's highly variable depending on whether you get your coffee at Starbucks or you get your coffee at the canteen. A big difference in the cost there. Do you take Grab or do you take the MRT? So all of those things, you can do the calculation for yourself. The costs that are shown there for the UB degree in Buffalo take into account the cost of living in the US, including housing and food and so on. So people are often curious about what happens to our students after they graduate. And I am very, very proud to say that they are getting wonderful jobs. They are going on to excellent graduate schools. They are doing great things after graduation. And it's not a coincidence. We have such a great program that they're extremely well prepared, and they stand out as remarkable people within this educational landscape in Singapore, and going into the workplace with a very robust skill set. We'll talk about that in our panel discussion as well. So we do what's called GES, Graduate Employment Survey, 6 months after the students have graduated. And we found in our most recent version that 82.8% had found employment within 6 months of graduation. So that's quite good. And the reasons at the end here, because of the very interactive and project-oriented and experiential learning that we incorporate within the classroom, students come away with not only very good knowledge, but also the things that I've listed out here: critical thinking skills, excellent communication skills as well. These are things that make our graduates so desirable within the workplace. SIM, you'll have a chance later on. We have some campus tours, but we are very, very happy from Buffalo to have our partnership with SIM, because they offer an excellent campus and not just a physical facility, but they also have so many different activities for students, different clubs and organizations that students can join, and have a very holistic undergraduate experience. There's more to undergraduate education than just learning in the classroom. We want students to develop holistically, and that entails lots and lots of other things that students can do outside of the classroom, which are made available. One of the other great resources here is the Career Center. SIM has its own bespoke in-house career development office. So they have connections. They can help students find internships and jobs after graduation. And so that is a very nice feature as well. So if you are keen, based on what you've heard up to this point, I'll tell you that our next semester, our next intake will be the fall semester, and the deadline for applying for that is July 18th. After that, we have 3 intakes per year. So the next 2 coming up are fall, then the following spring. The application deadline for that one will be June 23rd. And then we also have a summer intake. So at any point you can choose to join our program. And there's information there for contact information. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll ask right now that rather than start with questions from the audience, to hold off, and we can do that after we've had our panel discussion. So with that, I'll ask our panelists to come and join me up on stage. Thank you. Okay, so I've invited our panelists up on stage now, and we'll get started with our panel discussion. However, if I could just ask the people who are in the back of the room to please be quiet. It's causing some distraction for our people in the audience to hear when someone on stage is speaking. So if you are catching up with your friends or this or that and want to have some discussion, please be considerate and step outside so that people within the room can hear without any kind of interruption. Okay, so now we will introduce, I'll actually just have our panelists introduce themselves, and in turn, let's start with the far end of the room, Professor Melanie Green from the Department of Communication. If you could just tell us about yourself, first of all, who you are, what's your connection with SIMUB, and a little bit maybe about your research interests.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see such a packed room here. My name's Melanie Green, and I'm chair of the Department of Communication. I've been at the UB home campus for 9 years and been teaching at SIM in the summertime for almost that long. And my research is largely based around the idea of attitude change and persuasion. And in particular, looking at how the stories that people tell or the stories that we see through the media can help shift people's attitudes and behaviors, hopefully for the better.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. And next we have Benjamin Tove, one of our alumni. Could you introduce yourself and tell us your connection to SIM and UB, as well as your employment history and where you are now and how you got there?
Sure thing. So hello, everyone. So I'm Benjamin To. I'm actually a graduate in business administration, and I graduated in 2016. My career has been pretty much interesting. So I'll say, at first I joined BNP Paribas after graduation. And after 6 months, I went on to join Deloitte as a financial crime compliance advisory specialist. And there, there was a couple of years where I actually was, providing financial crime advisory to mainly financial institutions. That's where I kind of got, my foundation set in. Then after that, I actually went into the industry where I joined a crypto firm as a head of compliance. And subsequently, I think if you're aware, the crypto market has been pretty much volatile. So that actually spurred me to, relook at my career. And I actually went back to a bank, Standard Chartered Bank, and as a director in compliance. Yep. So that's pretty much my career path, which I think, I'm very happy to share. Is a bit different from what usually people would be, the career path that usually people would take.
Well, I don't know that there is such a thing as a typical career path. Mine was far from linear, but we won't go into that. Christian.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Christian Thieu. I'm the chair of the Department of Finance at UB. I've been at UB since 2007. And this is my 6th year, I guess, of teaching in Singapore in the summer, or 4th, I guess, if you don't count the COVID years. Research-wise, I look at determinants of performance for managers of non-standard investment funds, things, hedge funds, university endowment funds, pension funds. In other words, what is it that will make you believe that a hedge fund manager will outperform in their investment strategies? What characteristics of that manager makes you expect performance?
Okay, thank you. And lastly, we have Renette.
Hi everyone. My name is Renette. So I don't think my job experiences are as varied as Benjamin's. I actually graduated not too long ago, about less than 5 years ago. So I did sociology in UB. I left school in 2019. My first job was at the Ministry of Social and Family Development. I was a community worker, dealing with a lot of partnerships on the ground and also processing financial assistance schemes for the low-income individuals. I think I was there for close to 3 years. And then my second posting was at the Ministry of National Development. So I'm still there. I'm doing policies related to disputes. Yeah, so happy to share. Feel free to ask any questions later.
Okay, thank you. So our topic today is American higher education and the evolving workplace, combining skills and knowledge for success in a changing world. There's a lot to unpack there. So I would say, first of all, I've already spoken a little bit about American higher education. I think it's fairly obvious now. You just turn on the news and you see every day about how workplaces are changing for one reason or another, having gone through the pandemic where people were working from home, and now it seems like artificial intelligence is coming to take our jobs away from us. So things keep changing, and I would say education itself is evolving, not just the workplace, but as a response to that. So we'll talk about these in some detail here. And I think to start out with, first of all, let's unpack the difference between what we mean by skills and knowledge. These are the two of the things that go into the process of education or outcomes from education that we could look at. Why don't we start with Melanie? What are skills and what is knowledge, and how do you separate them out, and how do you think that they overlap, or in what ways are they distinct from each other?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I mean, I think that's a great question and a great distinction, because when we think about the knowledge that students gain, those are the kinds of things, at least in my field in communication, they're things like understanding the theories and processes that happen when people try to convey messages to other people. And so one of the things that we do, obviously, in our classes is we try to convey a lot of that knowledge. But then the skills piece is actually being able to put that in practice, right? It's one thing to kind of know at a theoretical level what makes an effective message. It's another thing to actually get in and try to actually do that. And so having that mix of both is really what we try to do in our classes. A lot of hands-on stuff, a lot of experiential learning, because I think that mix of having both the skills and the knowledge is what really prepares our students, not only for the current job market, but also it kind of future-proofs them in a way, because given that they have both of these things, they're adaptable and they're able to kind of deal with these changes because they know the frameworks of how things work, and they also know how to apply them.
Yeah, thank you. I think future proofing is a word we hear, a phrase we hear quite a lot nowadays. And it was a long, long time ago when I graduated from my undergraduate degree, and I think back on it. What do I remember? Nothing. No, some things. But in fact, you think about the knowledge you get, and that keeps changing. But I think that what you're talking about that is lasting is that kind of future proofing that comes from the combination, being able to build on the skills. Benjamin, anything to add from your perspective on this question?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point for Melanie, because, a lot of times, now that I'm inside, in a few years inside the working environment, you always find yourself being put in various kind of meetings. And through those meetings, usually you get a chance to either, ask questions and really try to, I would say, like, during those meetings, you definitely try not to be there to just ask questions to show that you're not participating, but it's more of like trying to really understand what's going on and, asking questions to really further, put yourself in perhaps a position that you can actually take away certain things. Because, at the start of career, you tend to actually be someone that, to take instructions from your seniors. And a lot of times, that would just be, after the meeting, you go through what's being done with a senior, and then, those were your takeaways. But as you, progress through a career like myself, I find that, being able to actually, have a good thought process that's quite similar to what I've actually done, during my studies in Buffalo, is to really like think about like what are the things to ask, how you should be processing certain information, and asking further questions to, make it easier for you to have those follow-up actions. So I think this is very important because, like what Melanie said, these are the things that maybe you wouldn't really learn explicitly, like, but it's through the being put there. Your professors will be, out there asking, questions, and being like trying to encourage you to, think about like what are the things that you should be asking. And through that, for myself, almost 3 years of experience with Buffalo, I actually, had that kind of like mindset to, really ask questions and think about how you can actually take this information and process it further.
I think you raised such a great point about it being sort of almost organically built in to the way when you come to our classes. What you're describing is just so typical that I think for us, from an American perspective, you don't even really think about it. But here, I think it's something quite unique. Would you say that when you came into Buffalo, you found that it was challenging or different from what you had experienced previously?
Yep, definitely. So before pursuing my studies in University of Buffalo, I was actually in Singapore Polytechnic, where I did same thing, banking and finance. But in polytechnics, usually the lecturers, professors, they will actually ask you to kind of like speak up, but they don't really encourage you in a way that you feel there's an incentive or it feels it's like it's safe, a good environment to actually do so. So most of the times, you tend to just, for myself, I tend to actually, stay quiet. But, when I came to University of Buffalo, the space felt different, where, you tend to feel like, okay, this is really a good environment to actually, ask questions. And you can see that the professors really don't just simply answer the question and then, move along. You can see that they actually, try to understand, why are you thinking certain questions? And maybe, try to bring that kind of like, I guess, thinking to the other the classmates as well. And I think that's very important because, through those bits by bits of encouragement, you tend to like, really enjoy speaking up in class.
Another wonderful point, and just to elaborate on it a bit, as the resident director here, I get to go around and observe quite a lot of classes, and I just find it so exciting when I go to a class and if a student raises a question, oftentimes what you'll see is the instructor, the professor of the course saying, that's an interesting question. How might we think about that? So rather than just giving an answer, but rather to develop the process of thinking through a problem and coming up with the answer on your own, which, by the way, this is what you're going to have to do after you graduate and you go to work, and now you're presented with some novel problem. So practicing that on a day-to-day basis through all of the different modules that you get here, again, I think it really comes out with a very powerful combination of skills and knowledge that are critical nowadays. Let's move on to Christian and see what he has to say on this topic.
Well, some examples on what is knowledge and what are skills. So I apologize to say I like Asam Laksa. Okay, so imagine that somebody gives me a lecture about how to make Asam Laksa. Long list of ingredients, mix them, and you get Asam Laksa paste. Well, I try that, okay? It's nowhere near what it should be, right? Why is that? Because I don't have the skills to make it. How would I acquire the skills to make it? Well, by making it repeatedly, right? By actually applying the knowledge, right? So one example from investments, people teach you that there's a momentum strategy, that if you buy stocks that have done well in the past and short stocks that have done poorly in the past, that strategy outperforms. Okay, so if you learn about that, you'll tend to form that strategy and think that that strategy is the only thing you can replicate what you've learned. In reality, if you buy any stocks and then wait for a while, then the stocks that have done well will weight more in your portfolio. The stocks that have done worse will weight less. And then if you do nothing, you're actually implementing a momentum strategy. Okay, so that's a skill. You know it if you do it. So because it's important to apply knowledge, we stress on experiential learning. So we try to get the students involved in actually doing things in classes, thinking about why is it that we teach what we teach? How does it apply? In fact, actually, without working with students on real things, teaching actually would be really boring. I would learn nothing just by lecturing. I'll just, repeat something that I know. Maybe it will make me think about something, but I think it will be boring. So we ourselves benefit from being challenged by students, from actually doing something with them. So I define, for example, class participation in my class by the fact that you have to be wrong twice during the semester to count, that you participated. Why is that? Because, a wrong question makes me think and makes other people in the class think.
Thank you, Christian. Again, very rich comments. And I'll start by saying we are a research university. And what does that mean? That we don't just share with you all of the things that are already known in the world. That's part of it. We're sharing the research that has already been completed, but our faculty continue to do research and answer questions that haven't been answered yet. And so that's very, very, very important. Such an important component of it. And I love Christian's comment about he wants his students to ask 2 questions or get 2 of them wrongly. I would manage that in the first 5 minutes probably, but yeah, the other thing I would say about it is that having spent most of my career in international education is that you can ask people all around the world, what do you consider to be good education? What comprises good education? And the answer that you get in one culture is going to be very different from in another. So something I often hear is knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. You go to school, you go to university because you want to get knowledge, but it's not like you just plug it into your mind and then all of a sudden, voila, you are educated. Well, I suppose that's one way of looking at it, but our way of looking at it is, again, it entails hard work, it entails engagement, and it entails a lot of practice. So this is the building up of the 2 things in tandem, the skills and the knowledge together, that makes for, in my view, the most effective form of education. Let's turn now to Renette. Anything more to add on this topic?
So on the topic of skills and knowledge, I was actually thinking about it as the panelists went through their responses to it. And I think I would take a different approach to it because in the study of sociology, a lot of things are actually more theoretical in nature. So things like sociology of diversity, sociology of gender. It's about how we apply that sociological lenses to social concepts and constructs. So those are actually the knowledge that we learn in classes. And it isn't exactly directly applicable to the workforce unless, let's say, you become an academic in social sciences, you choose to pursue the route of academia. But I think what my key takeaway studying was really like that application and that sort of experiential learning that would help us, that would inform what we learn in the classroom. So an example I can think of is in the module Sociology of Diversity, what we had to understand was about diverse social groups and social structures in any society, like our country. And then what I did for that class was to go to Golden Mile Complex. It's an ethnic enclave for Thai individuals and foreign migrant workers. So we had to do some field research, observe the people that pass through the complex, do some interviews, field work, and engaging with all these people really helped to broaden the sort of perspective on the diverse nature that makes up a society. And also builds that sort of empathy towards, let's say, unseen populations in Singapore. And how I applied that to my work was in my first job at MSF, when I was on the ground, I had to work very closely with low-income individuals, people who worked in public rental flats. And it really helped to inform how I conducted my engagements with them and seeing things from their perspective and how in my role as a community worker, how I can better support them and provide them with the resources that they're lacking. So those were the skills, the key skills that I think I took away from my experience in UB rather than like the knowledge itself of what I actually learned in the classroom. Other skills that I can think of that are really crucial and beneficial for my work, things like presentation and writing, because in the civil service, I think there's quite a huge emphasis on writing and how you communicate effectively with a lot of stakeholders. So we work with a broad range of individuals, from the ground officers all the way up to senior management. And it's really about knowing how to communicate effectively what you want and try to put your point across in a very convincing manner. So this is what we learned also in classes when we had a lot of all these presentations and group works. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Renette. Actually, one of the things that always impresses me about sociology majors is their skills of observation, which is one of the things that they develop and practice so much. And But for all of our programs across the board, that communication aspect is very, very important. And I think that just to share with the audience a little on that before we go on to the next thing, we came here from the US to launch our program here, and I came here in 2004 and immediately realized that students who have come through the Singapore system, they have already, when they enter the program, a great foundation, but it really stands out that they don't feel confident expressing themselves. And so we straight away began to make it a much more kind of proactive process to engage the students by doing lots of presentations in class, starting out in a very sort of structured and scaffolded way, such that by the time they graduate as seniors, they've had a lot of practice. And that doesn't mean that every single student is going to become, you know, a brilliant public speaker, but at least they have had the opportunity to develop that skill such that when they go out to the workplace, they can make a very, very strong impression on somebody who within this environment, I'd say is above and beyond normal expectations in terms of communication skills, something I'm actually very, very impressed by and proud of amongst our alumni, including Renette. Thank you. So there's another question I had here. Are skills without knowledge of any value? Is knowledge without skill of any value? We won't go through everyone individually for this, but would anyone like to say anything on that particular topic? It's more of a sort of rhetorical question, I suppose. Okay, so the answer is no. The answer is to both of them is no. No, actually, I think that the common theme that we've heard from our panelists today is that these two things working together in tandem really does produce a great set of outcomes for our students and comprises an excellent form of education. We'll move on to something a bit more concrete. We'll start again with Melanie. Could you give us some examples of how the skills and knowledge are taught together in tandem within your degree program in communication?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have a lot of hands-on opportunities for our students. So for example, in the course that I teach on persuasion, the culminating project for the class is a group project where they have to design a multimedia advertising campaign, but they have to base it in the kinds of theories and ideas that they've learned. So it's not just coming up with things off the top of their head, but they have to ground it in well-established empirical and theoretical principles. And I have to say that the students end up doing a phenomenal job with it. They are very, very impressive with what they come up with, both in their presentation skills and their ideas. But so there's things like that, these big culminating projects in the classes. There's also opportunities throughout the classes with smaller activities where, for example, my colleague Janet Yang teaches a course on risk communication, right? And understanding risk in terms of what things should we be more afraid of and do something more to combat, like climate change, or what things do people perceive as overly risky and how do we calibrate that? She has students engage deeply with case studies so that they have hands-on experience with that. Our research methods courses give students a lot of experience with, okay, not just how do you receive this knowledge, but what are the appropriate procedures for generating knowledge? So I think there's a lot of different ways that we kind of build those bridges together.
Thanks. And I'll also mention within our communication department, a couple of other courses that are taught by one of our local instructors, Mr. Ray Monteverde. So at the 400 level, he has courses that one in advertising and one in public relations. And these are really, really interesting courses in the sense that the students take all the different theories that they've learned in the course of their foundation modules for communication and conduct something like a simulation, as if working in an advertising agency or as if working in a public relations agency. And the projects they are phenomenal. They are really, really amazing, bringing together all of the different things that students have learned over their time within the program. And Mr. Monteverde, by the way, as I mentioned, he's well connected within Singapore, within those industries, and has helped many students move on to different kinds of internships or jobs as well. Christian, how about in your program? Could you tell us a little bit about how the skills and knowledge are developed?
Well, so I mean, true experiential learning is the short answer. So I teach investments, for example. Sometimes you have to design an investment strategy, and then you have to backtest that investment strategy. How do you do that? Well, you need data for that. So for example, all the students in the investments class have to create an account on a data hub that University at Buffalo subscribes to. That gives them access to all the prices. I think it's from 1926 of all the stocks traded in the US. So if you have an investment strategy idea, then you can test it in that way. Our curriculum is, has connections with two professional organizations in the US. So with the Charter of Financial Analysts, CFA organization, and then also with Bloomberg. So we're an educational partner of Bloomberg. That means that our students can get Bloomberg certifications. It's the Bloomberg Market Concepts certification. So students in the investment class who want to do it, that's not something that I mandate because it takes quite a bit to go through the certification, could get it. In the main campus, we actually have a fund, an actual fund with real money that students manage. So everybody within some parameters, I think it's over 3.65 GPA, receives an invitation to apply to the fund. The students in the fund interview the applicant, and then they decide to hire him or her or not. And this fund basically trades in, as I said, again, with real money. So students in Singapore can also participate. We also have professionals coming to teach courses, mostly in the master's level. We don't have a master's program in Singapore, not yet, at least, but maybe we will. So for example, the banking class in the MS in Finance program is taught by the treasurer of the 10th largest bank in the US. So this person carves, time from his very busy schedule to come and talk to our students. And then many other courses are also taught by, so for example, the derivatives course is taught by a risk manager at a bank. So the students get direct and actually sometimes intimate knowledge about what happens at these institutions, right? So it's quite fun to go to the banking class and then have the treasurer of the 10th largest bank in the US basically come and tell you how, when the Silicon Valley Bank people took their money out and then had a run on the bank, they had to put their deposit somewhere else. And then actually our bank in Buffalo, the largest bank in Buffalo, was one of the banks where actually people came. So their worry was, how do they take these deposits quickly enough?
Okay, thank you. And to add on to Christian's description of some of those experiential things, I'll add one more from the School of Management. There's a capstone course called Strategic Management, which students take as the final course, a 400 level course. And that is it's basically a business simulation where students work together in a group. One of them would be the chief financial officer. Somebody else handles the marketing and all of the other different components. And it's very, very, very intricate and very demanding, but students go away with a sense of what working in the business world is really, really like. So speaking of working in the real world, let's ask Renette and Benjamin about their experiences. Could you give us some examples of, since your graduation, what are some of the skills that you learned while you were studying in UB, and how do you apply them along with the knowledge? Renette has already spoken about it, but maybe you could just give us a few more examples.
I think for my first job, as I shared earlier, I was a ground officer working on the field to interact with a lot of the local populations, the people who are from public rental flats. I think other experiences that I had in UB really helped me inform the way I engage all these clients. That's what we call them. So something else that I experienced in my UB education was I was fortunate enough to do a semester abroad in the Buffalo home campus. And there's lots of opportunities over there. And I was put on a research project by a graduate student. I think her research topic was understanding how refugees in Buffalo City integrated with the rest of the population. So that was quite interesting because, you know, in Singapore, we rarely hear this term called refugees, right? But actually, a lot of these refugees who were displaced, they end up in global cities like Toronto or even Buffalo. And speaking to them, hearing about their experiences, made me think about what I actually wanted to do once I graduate. How could I make that sort of difference to the society that I lived in? And that's why I entered my first job. And I think being able to relate to all the clients, trying to let them know that they are not alone and that there's always like a helping hand reaching out to them, that made all that difference. At that point in time, I think just experiencing our lives together as, I mean, how do I put this? I think people are divided by different lines across society, depending on, like, let's say your income levels or race or religion. And I think my work taught me that at the end of the day, we're all humans and we're all Singaporeans, and that should be the thing that unite us instead of across racial, religious, or income lines. Yeah.
Thank you, Renette. Can I also just put in an advertisement for UB Bound as well? It's so nice to hear your description of the city. I lived in Buffalo for 2 years and really had a wonderful time there. And it's known as the city of good neighbors. That's one of the things about it. That why is it a city of good neighbors? I don't know, but I think the weather is so horrible that it takes away all of the distinctions. When the weather is horrible, everyone suffers, and so then you have some bonding experience. But yeah, if you get a chance, going to Buffalo is a great place to study. Yeah. Benjamin, let's move on and see if you have anything to add about concrete examples of how what you learned in your undergraduate program has contributed to your success in your work.
Yeah, definitely. So I think maybe I can just break it down into the different kind of some of the modules that has been something that I actually went back to look at ever since I started my career. So one of them is actually ESL. So it's kind of like an English module that trains you to really like communicate as well as write well. So there was one, I guess, project. Then that was actually to find a topic that you're interested in, and then do necessary research and write a paper on it. So back then, the good thing is the lecturer actually gave you the freedom to pick any topic that you want, as long as you're able to actually follow up and do the necessary paper. So back then, I actually did, even though my interest has always been anti-money laundering, financial crime, I was thinking like I shouldn't be too fixated on that. So I decided to pick something different. So I took like a topic on corporate social responsibility, CSR. So this is something that back then I thought it was quite hyped up. And then eventually, it seems to actually more or less die down until the whole ESG came into the picture, and then it kind of exploded again. So in recent months, I actually, was as part of compliance, this is also another topic that I have to actually be aware of. Like, is there any, for example, for ESG, there's a lot of, I guess, hot topic now about how the greenwashing issues, as well as how can someone remain compliant, or rather, how can companies remain compliant in a few of their ESG strategies, while, the other kind of departments are not doing the same thing. So I actually went back to see, the paper that I actually wrote on CSR, and that, because back then you really have to cite a lot of things that you can't just pluck from the thin air. So I did look at all the research materials that I actually did back then. And those are really still pretty much relevant in this time, even though it's been a couple of years now. So I think that was one thing that actually got, I was able actually to, go back to. Another thing would be, also in my line of work, we actually not just look at financial crime, but also, a lot of financial crime in the kind of areas such as, securities fraud. And in the whole crypto space, this kind of exploded as well, because in the US, US being the big brother, the US regulator kind of like, recently identified a few tokens, crypto asset tokens, as securities. And then back then, even during my studies in Buffalo, UB, there's definitely, times where you'll be able to actually understand what's the definition of securities. And that's when, you learn that along the way, it really changes, where you can't really apply the definition of securities into new classes of assets, because those definition was kind of like defined a long time ago. And as we have new different classes of assets like cryptocurrency, you do really have to actually tweak it to kind of include certain nuances to it. Yeah, so I think this is where it's a bit interesting, because in the US, certain things they say they want to classify tokens as securities through the Howey test, which the Howey test has been in use for decades, a very long time ago. And then you realize that maybe that's not the way to actually define whether a certain cryptocurrency is a security or not. So I think these are the things again going back to where I was learning about how the securities, about the different kind of like investment products, kind of gave me the background, the foundation to really bring it to the real life, and then try to understand maybe certain things might work in the past, but might not be the same in the future. And I think one last module, which really left a great impression to myself, is the fundamentals of strategic management, which I think Kevin had mentioned earlier. So interestingly, the Professor Paul McAfee, he actually saw how he can make it interesting for us by getting in someone from outside the industry to give us a business case, a business scenario, and want us to actually break it down to the different kind of teams, departments, and try to find ways to, collaborate, discuss in solving perhaps a scenario or a business case that is applicable for the entire company. So he actually managed to get someone from Carousel. And back then, we really didn't know about Carousel, but we all know like Carousel actually exploded in recent years. But back then, Carousel was new. They gave us a business case saying, they really want to actually ramp up, having more people, more users on the platform. But again, like back then it was free. How would it be the right time to actually find a way to monetize the whole platform? Or if they want to actually, find ways to monetize the platform through the users, maybe what are the other ways to actually do so? So that was very interesting because, over the past 2 years, we have already learned a lot about the foundation, the knowledge. And this was really the right opportunity for us to actually put those knowledge into practical use. And I think the other good thing is, besides being able to, do the necessary financial calculation or, necessary research, what's important is to find a way to actually, interact with the other colleagues from the other so-called departments. So back then I was actually in the finance department that I set up, and we really had to, speak to the other departments like HR, marketing, even accounting, just to, say that, hey, we feel that this is something that we want. But of course, from the marketing department, that might not be their priority. So it was very great. Every time I was actually really looking forward to class, because you'll be, spending that half an hour engaging with your colleagues and, sorry, I want to say colleagues, classmates, to really prove a point and, get their buy-in. And ultimately, when we presented to the people from Carousel, they were quite impressed that, we were able to think or give suggestions that they might not have thought so. I guess it could be that because the thinking from the real working world as compared to academics is a bit different, but we're definitely able to actually contribute and ultimately that really felt like a sense of achievement at the end of the course.
Thank you for sharing, Benjamin. A couple of things just to say about that strategic management class by Dr. McAfee. That's the one I referred to earlier. He always reinvents it. Every semester it's something new, but it's always something very, very engaging for the students and challenging, but also something that produces great outcomes. The other thing I would like to mention is that Benjamin is an old timer amongst our alumni. You graduated in 2016, right? So he mentioned ESL as one of his foundation courses. That has been recreated. As I mentioned, I think American education evolves as well it should, because times keep changing as well. So since you took that class, that has been expanded to include many new components that are very, very germane to the kinds of things people do today. So in fact, when I started my career as an academic many, many years ago, the first class I taught was freshman composition, and that entailed writing essays. What else did we do? We wrote essays. But now you do presentations, you do infographics. There are all of these other components that have been built in to modernize it. And one of the nice features is that all of the projects that you do can be archived in a digital portfolio now, so that when you graduate, you have a collection of your work. I guess Benjamin had to go and dig his up, but nowadays it would be, you can store it all and display it. So some of our students on graduation like to put a link in their LinkedIn account so that people can then see, wow, the student not only has a degree, but can also create beautiful infographics, or can have some, lovely presentation slides or this or that. So that's another area where our education has evolved over the years. So let's turn now to the evolving workplace, and we have a little bit of time left before we open up for questions and answers. I'll just sort of ask generally amongst all the panelists to talk in turn about how in your career, in your life, in your work, have things evolved over time, and what have you done to keep up? What do you see for in the future taking place? And how have you been, as it were, as Melanie said at the beginning, future-proofed? We'll start with Melanie.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the most obvious changes that's taken place in not only the academic sector, but other places is with the pandemic coming in and sort of the increasing amount of our lives that was happening online, right? Classes through Zoom, videos, things like that. And so, at that time, there was a big scramble for everyone to sort of start to gain those skills. How can we run an efficient meeting over Zoom? How can we create videos that are as engaging as possible to continue educating students, things like that? And so, I mean, one of the nice side effects of that is that now developing those kinds of skills to be able to be effective across multiple modalities is something that's now sort of built into our curriculum. Our students are gaining those skills as well, and so on. And I think that question also kind of makes me think of an example. One of the areas of interest in the field of communication, of course, is the idea of social media, right? Social media for business, social media for interpersonal interactions, things like this. And if you think of the history of social media, there's been a lot of changes, right? If you're, been around a little while, like I have, maybe things like MySpace or Friendster, or things that, kids these days wouldn't even heard of. And then, Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And so one of the things that communication as a research field does is tries to understand those different forms of social media. But one of the ways that we do it in the field is by looking at the different qualities, or to use the technical term, affordances of these things. And so it's not just how do people interact on a particular social media, but we know things about how do people interact when a medium is anonymous versus attached to your real name? How do people interact when you're interacting with a group of friends and people you know versus a group of strangers? How do you interact when it's text versus video, right? Our research teaches us a lot about these things. And what that does is it means that when the next thing comes along, right? The next TikTok, the next, virtual reality site, the thing that we haven't heard of, our field and our students are going to be prepared for that because they know the basic principles. And you can apply those basic principles when those new technologies, when those new situations come down the pike. So I think it kind of really reflects back on Kevin's original question. How do we bring the skills and knowledge together? Having the knowledge to adapt to different situations can be a really important ability to have.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, I think adaptability is so critical nowadays because things really change so quickly. Benjamin?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much like, even back when I was studying, there were a few, market events that actually kind of seems to be different from what you have been studying or learning in class. And I think one good example right now is really how, people have been talking about recession, how, the interest rate is going to remain high for a while before, the US will start, rather reducing the interest rates from this, kind of called the top in this year. And then, you kind of like bring back to what you have been studying and think, is this in line with the kind of like the correlation? Because, when we study in class, then it's pretty much very simple. The correlation seems to be very, one event will really lead to the other. For example, if interest rates to increase, certain things will happen. And then, I think, back then when I was studying, there were a few market events that seems to be a bit dissociated with the real world. And I was actually, bringing those questions to the professors and asking like, hey, you taught me this, but why are we not seeing that in the real world? So I think, this is really a good opportunity. Like if you were to come back, join UB, you know that the professors, they are pretty much, again, be in sync with the real world. They'll be able to actually give you those valuable answers, which I think I might not be able to get it right now, because even some of my colleagues might not be like really understanding of the whole market environment. But I think this will be the right opportunity for you to, for example, to bring in real life examples, say that, hey, why is this not happening? And then I believe the professors will be able to actually, give you the kind of like mindset, because the understanding, because they should be pretty much like understanding of like what's going on and how they can actually explain to you why is this not happening.
Okay, thank you. Christian?
Also, about what's changing, I think then there's two separate areas here. So I guess you can talk about what's changing in the field that we teach in, so finance in my case, and then we can think about what's changing in higher education, right? So that's a separate conversation. So regarding what's changing in finance, I build actually up a bit on what Melanie was saying, that I guess when you teach something, then you're trying actually to think about what's coming, and then you're trying to make your students think a little bit about that too, right? So for example, for the finance students, I guess one game changer is, the new AI tools, the large language models, things like ChatGPT, right? So huge entry to learn how to code, for example, right? So people typically, our students don't code in Python, right? So computer science would, students in finance don't find the need to do it. I mean, with ChatGPT, you really don't need to. I mean, you can immediately actually learn how to code, I mean, specifically for a project that you have to run. So now there's no excuse actually for the students in my class not to do it. I mean, it's extraordinarily easy. So all these things that you have to actually teach and then spend time covering, now you don't have to do it. So you can focus on the concepts, and basically then the skills could be learned much faster because of these tools that could assist us in being more helpful. So I guess including tools like this into what we do is important. Other things are, things like machine learning in finance. So we are trained, I guess I don't know, I mean, people who went to school, I don't know, years and years ago, I should say so we're trying to think that the models should be simple, right? So you design an investment strategy, the model for that investment strategy has to be relatively simple. Well, there's newer research that says that no, just take a machine learning model that is extraordinarily complicated, has many parameters, and then it turns out that if you use these very complicated models to design a trading strategy that, is based on predicting what something does the next day, the more parameters you use, the better it is, right? So there's a virtue to complexity, right? So that's basically a game changer for what, people trading statistics actually were thinking about. So it's including things like this in our classes that I guess makes those classes valuable. Changing higher education, that's a separate conversation, right? So I want to point out actually one thing there. If you look at how much tuition cost, right? I mean, you're all parents here. It's basically gone up crazy, like on a straight line, right? I had kids in college, right? So I can feel that, pain myself. If you look at the salaries that people actually made at graduation, those are stagnant, I think now even decreasing, right? So you wonder, how long will this go? It can't go that long, right? So what else should you require of the university basically to justify those costs? And I would propose one thing, it's to tap into the network that is UB, right? So UB has existed for a long time. The finance program has existed for a long time, right? So for example, our MS in finance has been running since 2004, I think. What does that mean? Some of the people are managing directors. If you reach out to them and then tell them that you're a UB student, they'll talk to you, right? So we have managing directors, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, I don't know, London Stock Exchange Group. So make use of the network that the university is more.
Thank you, Christian. And the moral of the story here is that maybe the mode of communication changes over time, but it doesn't change one critical thing: networking, networking, networking. Very, very important for everyone. Renette, final word.
Okay, so just 2 quick points from me. I think new skills that have come out in the recent times would be tech skills, data skills. So I think what Melanie mentioned earlier, pre-COVID, I think it's just unthinkable for us to have online meetings, right? Meetings or like engaging people is always in person. So can you imagine the time when COVID hit and my role was frontline facing with meet clients, and suddenly we can't do all these things, and my boss went a bit crazy and he was like, okay, you're the youngest person here, so please go and learn how to like conduct meetings on Zoom and organize events on Zoom. And of course I had to do it because my boss was not going to do it. So it's things like that where you're really thrown to do something and you just have to figure it out. And of course you have to pull it off lah. So I previously organized events for like about 300 packs. It was like in person with a networking lunch and all that. And then suddenly you just have to like move this and put it online. Yeah. So I think these are that's something new. I think something else would be, I guess on a related note, more relevant to my current role, because I have to meet like senior management a lot and present certain positions or policies. So because COVID is still here, right? So let's say you schedule an in-person meeting and suddenly the day before your meeting, your boss gets COVID and your boss says, okay, meeting is cancelled, but I still want to hear what this is about. So can you translate it in an email submission instead? And the mode of how you communicate this policy position changes. From an in-person meeting, I think it's very easy to engage like this, right? And suddenly the boss wants it over email. So how are you going to change how you communicate this? And how do you justify, let's say, a policy position? And this is where data comes in. I think data is like the big buzzword, right? It has been here. I think it's here to stay. And I think it's very important to pick up data-related skill sets to justify certain positions that you have. And I think for the UB education, there are courses that would help or help students develop this skill set. So, I mean, I'm a social science student, but there's also interdisciplinary modules that we can take. So I can take classes from the business side of things. I can take the computer science foundational class as well. Yeah.
Can I? So Kevin was saying earlier that, I mean, this continuous learning is sort of crazy. I mean, we give homeworks and homeworks and homeworks. So, I mean, I couldn't help actually by thinking of homework for the audience, right? So we're talking about knowledge and skills. there is data for that. So there is a data that's called OStarNet, right? I think it's the occupational, I don't know, database. Just Google OStarNet. If you're interested in becoming something, investment fund manager, for example, just type investment fund manager in there, and there's data on surveys given to members of this profession in time. You scroll down, you'll find what skills they need, and then you'll find what knowledge they need. And then you sharpen those.
I would be willing to bet that almost any meaningful kind of job you could find there, communication would be somewhere near the top of the list. So thanks for sharing, Renette. For the young people in our audience who are preparing to enter university, get ready. When you graduate, the first thing that they'll tell you, you're young, learn this new thing. So I tell Candace that all the time. I think right now I have a couple more questions for our audience if needed, but let's ask our audience if they have any questions for our panelists. No questions? If there are no questions, I'll conclude with a couple more for our panels. We're having lunch in a few minutes. Christian mentioned laksa. Are you hungry?
Is there any?
We will have lunch shortly, but here's a question just for everyone in general on our panel, a fun question to conclude with. We'll start with our visiting faculty members. What's your favorite thing about Singapore?
Well, I think you kind of like previewed it, right? I mean, isn't everyone's favorite thing about Singapore the amazing food that we have here? But also one of the favorite things about being in Singapore, I think for me, is interacting with the students here is actually so much fun. I mean, the groups that we have coming into UB, they're engaged, they're interesting, they're curious. So yeah, Singapore is great. And the Singapore students are amazing too.
Yeah, and I think that in fact, when our visiting faculty come here, for them, it's a learning experience. As Christian was saying, he would be bored if people didn't raise questions. So it's a great opportunity for our faculty to come here and learn about a completely different part of the world. And now food, definitely good, but for me, climate. I prefer. Christian, what's your favorite thing? We know laksa is one of them, but what else?
Well, I mean, the laksa that I like is Assam laksa. So. Okay, I mean, food definitely, but I mean, not really. So I like actually to learn. I mean, I like the practical nature, I think, of people in Singapore a lot. I think it's probably I'd say probably the best in the world. So I like to learn actually how to think in practical terms myself. And I like the drive, I think, of the students, and the drive and the resilience of the students in Singapore. I mean, you can ask them to do nearly anything in classes, and then they say it's too hard, we can't do it, it's impossible. At the end of that time period, actually, they've done it. So that's very similar, actually, to a class of gifted math students that I teach at the University at Buffalo. Same behavior. It's hard, it's impossible. At the end of the period, they do it. So I like actually to learn about that. And I like to convince actually the students in Singapore to come to UB, I mean, to UB Bound. I mean, not just because we want them actually at UB, but, because places like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, need great people. And typically the students in Singapore, fit that description. So for example, one of the UB Bound students actually that decided to do an MS in finance, I think she's the top student or among the top 3 students in nearly every class that she took. Okay, so I mean, that's what I like, I guess, about Singapore.
Thank you.
And the food.
So how about this from the angle of a student? Renette, what was your favorite thing about being a student at UB?
I think thinking about my experiences, I think UB molded me to the person I am today. I think there was a lot of room and space to be whoever you wanted. If you just want an education, it provides for you. If you want more than education, you want an experience, it also provides for you. For me, I think I think something that was interesting was that so towards the end of my graduation, I was like, I didn't know what to do. So I decided to take a gap year. So I took some leave of absence and I went out to the working world, did a couple of internships. The school could also accommodate that for you. They're not saying like, no, you have to graduate in like a set amount of time. You can take all the time you need as long as, I guess, you graduate at the end of the day. I managed to go to Buffalo, like what Kevin said, experience how things were like at the UB home campus, did lots of student activities, was a research assistant, like I said earlier, took Spanish. So even things that I wanted to learn outside of what I thought my studies would be, it was all there for you. So a lot of good memories, did a lot of things, and yeah, very grateful for the education.
Yeah, actually, I hear this a lot. You can make of it what you want. There's a lot of flexibility and there's so many opportunities, and really just take ownership of it and make your own path. And really, you can do whatever you like. Benjamin.
Yeah, I actually echo after Renette because, through my 2 and 3 years at UB, there was times like, I felt that maybe I wanted to do something different. And because, in SIM, they do have a lot of different kind of interesting, I wouldn't say projects, but interesting things that you can take on. So one of them, and CCAs. So one of them is actually the investment and networking club. So in my first year, I thought I wanted to front load a lot of my modules so that I can do things like graduate faster. But in my second year, I actually felt that, hey, I definitely need some time to do things that I'm interested in. And, being flexible with the kind of like modules you'll be able to choose at the start of each semester is very important because it allows you to, for example, if I'm going to join a CCA, I'm definitely not going to do a lot more modules that I'm used to, because then, it kind of like will overstretch you. So actually in second year, I tried to drop a few modules to be taken at a slower pace. And I was able to actually really enjoy my time with the new CCA that I joined. And subsequently, I also actually went on to sign up for this Model United Nations program, which actually allows you to actually, of course, you have to be selected, but after you being selected, you actually be able to represent SIM at a more global level. So I actually went on to represent SIM at Harvard in Boston. And that really gave you that extra, I would say extra edge when you go for interviews, but it really gives you that kind of flexibility to go for a program and then not worry about, hey, do I have to actually rush or do my assignments or do my tests while I'm actually at the program. Yeah, so I think the flexibility is very, very important, and it's something that I really enjoy.
Okay, thank you so much, Benjamin. So you've heard from our panelists today about various topics, and so I guess I can just conclude by saying, if you do come and enroll in the UB program, what you are going to find is a wonderful opportunity to build up the knowledge that you get from a research university with professors like Melanie and Christian, who are on the cutting edge within their fields, and you are combining that with a process of education that is also allowing you a tremendous opportunity to build up a huge set of skills of application, of communication, and so on. Critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, and group works. These are all things that are so critical, so that when you graduate from UB, you are going to be a star. So I hope you will consider it, join our program at one of our upcoming intakes. For the rest of the day today, what we have in the back of the room there are some poster presentations by some of our students who are currently in the program. You can take a look and see some examples of their project work. We have our staff over there to answer questions about things like admissions, this and that, different program tables around here, so you can approach the alumni and current students and faculty members who are here to represent their programs. And we have some lovely campus tours you can go on. And also, I don't know if we have laksa, but we have some kind of lunch as well. So thank you so much for coming to hear our presentation and our panel today. It's been very, very nice to talk about our university and our partnership with SIM. And thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to our panel this afternoon. Before we move on for lunch, I would like to invite up Dr. Timothy Chan to present gifts to our panelists. Please. You would like to. You'd like to say any words? Give gifts. Yes. Like take a photo all together. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Please enjoy lunch now and take a chance to stop by each of the booths. They are arranged by academic majors to speak with our current students, our instructors, faculty, and alumni. We thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon.